I told him that things were getting ready to get really bad, and I would be better off not here. And I asked him to shoot me.
And you asked him to shoot you?
That's correct.
And what was his response?
I mean, I think at first he was a little surprised, but then he said, okay.
You're hearing Alec Murdaugh there admitting in that newly released audio recording that he had hired a hitman to shoot and kill him so that his surviving son, Buster, could collect his life insurance policy. That recording with Murdaugh speaking to an agent from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, was played for the jurors in court. The agent just finished testifying, and jurors are now hearing testimony from a SLED special agent who was part of the investigation into the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh in June of 2021. What are jurors going to do with this case? The prosecution is set to rest their case shortly. It could be in the next day or so, and then the defense will bring their witnesses to testify. Joining us this morning, trial attorney, legal analyst Brian Claypool. Brian, good to see you. So the defense is going to lay out part of their strategy is Alec's drug addiction, and that somebody else committed these murders and it's somehow tied to his drug addiction, that he was paying out $50,000 a month to supply himself with the drugs he needed. Is this a plausible theory? Are they going to be able to convince the jury of this?
Hey, Marnie, great to be back with you. If the prosecution was only going to have that evidence in their defense case, then I think it would not be as helpful, right? It wouldn't be as persuasive. But when you bring that evidence in with all this damning testimony against the investigators for failing, for example, to go in and do blood testing inside the house after the shooting, in the sinks, on the floors, in the washing machines, for the investigation's failure to go out to Murdaugh's mother's home immediately, right, and secure any evidence there, and for telling a grand jury false information about a bloody T-shirt. I mean, when you combine, and let's talk about the lack of forensics, right? The lack of the guns, 2 guns used. When you combine all of that with this testimony about this alleged plot, I think it might be enough to persuade 1 or 2 jurors to get a hung jury.
Right. So the onus is really on the prosecution and the investigators initially, that they honed in on Alec Murdaugh from the beginning when there may have been all these other possible suspects, right, tied to the drug addiction, tied to the boat crash where his son Paul was driving. There were people who had it out for the family. If the defense is smart, they're going to lean into all of those past cases that show somebody else may have wanted to harm this family.
Yeah, Marnie, exactly. This is not your typical type of murder case. I had a murder for hire plot case in South Florida a few years back, and my case was a lot different than this case when I was defending the accused in that case. But here, you just have so much other evidence of potentially somebody else. We haven't even talked about the boating accident where there could have been somebody there that was coming after Paul, for example, and then you've got these alleged drug dealers. You've got $50,000 a week that he's allegedly spending on drugs too. What if he hasn't paid some of that, and somebody's coming back after the family as well to get after the family? So look, you and I have always talked about this case in the context of a heavyweight boxing match, Marnie. And I've got to tell you, you can't be exchanging rounds with defense. If you want to win this case in a 12-round match, you've got to win 11 out of those 12 rounds, maybe a small little bit of doubt in the juror, but not enough to reach reasonable doubt. But if you're splitting rounds like this is not going to be a verdict in the prosecution's favor.
So what do you think? Does the defense call Alec Murdaugh to the stand? Does he get up and tell the jury, I didn't do this?
I don't think Murdaugh needs to testify. I think you have these interviews, by the way. And by the way, Marnie, why did they have Owen the lead investigator play the second interview the other day? I don't even know what benefit that really brought to the jury. The jury, Marnie's already heard twice now through 2 interviews. Murdaugh says, I didn't kill my wife. I didn't kill my son. There are other people may have done this. I don't understand what benefit that brought. So you already have Murdaugh saying, I didn't do this.
I guess
right?
the benefit, Brian, maybe, I mean, they're trying to prove inconsistencies in his story, right? That interview, he seemed to flub his timeline a little bit, like things didn't match up. I mean, is that why?
Well, yeah, well, to your point, one good point they did get out of the second interview with Owen was the change of clothes, right? That Murdaugh, he had to admit that he changed clothes. And then when they asked him point blank, hey, when did you change clothes? He's like, I don't know. I mean, that's bad. That was really bad for Murdaugh. So that was helpful. But getting back to your point, I mean, if you put Murdaugh on the stand, then he's going to get cross-examined forever about how horrible his personal life is. And why would you want that evidence coming in so close to the end of the trial as well? I personally think the defense has already created enough reasonable doubt to get one or two jurors. Look, the defense is not going to get an acquittal either, Marnie. They're not going to get an acquittal, and I don't think prosecution is going to get a conviction. I think the defense has done an incredible job of focusing on the investigation, focusing on this could be somebody else, focusing on you targeted Murdaugh from the start. You even lied to a grand jury about this guy because you wanted him so bad, yet you didn't go out and even investigate the mom's house for 3 months. I think they've already shored up a really powerful argument there. So to create reasonable doubt. So why then would you put Murdaugh on the stand and risk him potentially slipping up and saying something devastating in the case? I don't think they need to.
We're weeks into this. The prosecution has given it all they've got. Do you expect that the defense will take as long calling witnesses to the stand, or have they done a good enough job in cross that they could rest their case pretty quickly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what a lot of people think in high-profile murder trials is that the defense has an obligation to put on as many witnesses as the prosecution, and that's not the case. And in this case, like the case I told you about I did in Florida, I actually was attacking the Boynton Beach Police Department in that case as well. I got a hung jury in the first trial because I went after the police department. I cross-examined their method of investigation for allegedly coercing informants, things like that. So good defense lawyers create their defense case through cross-examination of prosecution witnesses. And that's what they have done really effectively here. I don't see the defense case taking but a couple of days. I don't think they have to do much more, but maybe bring in some potential friendly witnesses to Murdaugh to try to say, hey, look, this guy's not capable of killing his family members. He was a nice, loving husband. I mean, other than that, Marnie, I can't think of much else they're going to need.
Yeah, and that may be Buster, the surviving son. It may be one of his brothers. We shall see. Brian, good to see you this morning. Great analysis.
You, Greg, thanks. Have a good weekend.
You too.